I'm Amber, and my 30th birthday became the day I finally understood my place in my family, or lack thereof. While I sat alone at a reserved table for 6, my younger sister Morgan was boarding a flight to Paris, courtesy of my parents. 30 years of trying to be enough, of creating art that no one saw, of achievements that went unacknowledged, all crystallized when I overheard my father's words, "Morgan's the one who makes us proud." Some wounds cut too deep to heal, but sometimes they become the very cracks that let your true light shine through. Before I share how my perfect birthday turned into the day I finally stood up for myself, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever felt invisible in your own family. Growing up as the older sister, I'd always been the responsible one. While Morgan dazzled everyone with her natural charisma, I was the steady presence, the reliable daughter. I'd built a life I thought was respectable, teaching art at Westfield High School, maintaining my small but cozy apartment downtown, and painting whenever I could steal a few hours for myself. Nothing extraordinary by my family's standards, but it was honest work that occasionally brought me joy. Morgan, on the other hand, had cultivated a growing social media following by showcasing her glamorous lifestyle. At 28, she'd already collaborated with several fashion brands and was constantly being flown to exotic locations for sponsored content. Her Instagram feed was a carefully curated display of success that my parents loved to share with their friends, often with captions like "Our beautiful daughter living her best life." My modest classroom victories and weekend art projects never seemed to warrant the same enthusiasm. It had always been this way. Morgan was the pretty one, the natural talent, the daughter who effortlessly commanded attention at family gatherings. I was the one who worked twice as hard for half the recognition. While Morgan received unwavering support for every venture she pursued, I learned early that approval in our family was conditional. When I graduated college with honors in fine arts, my parents showed up an hour late to the ceremony, having attended Morgan's dance recital earlier that day. When I had my first small exhibition at a local coffee shop, only my friend Bailey came. My mother had promised to be there but called last minute saying Morgan needed help preparing for a job interview. The pattern was so consistent that I'd almost stopped noticing it, almost. Despite this history, I still harbored hope that my 30th birthday would be different. Milestone birthdays were always celebrated in our family, and I'd gone all out with the planning. I'd reserved a table at Rossetti's, an Italian restaurant that was slightly beyond my teacher's salary, but I wanted the evening to feel special. I'd invited my parents, Morgan, who I thought was in town, Aunt Jessica, the only relative who seemed to see me, and 2 close friends. "I'd love to be there, honey," my mother had said when I called her 3 weeks earlier. "Let me check with your father and confirm." That confirmation never definitively came, despite my follow-up texts. Just vague responses like "we should be able to make it" or "looking forward to it." Still, I remained optimistic. Surely they wouldn't miss my 30th birthday. Even Morgan had responded with a thumbs-up emoji to my invitation text, which I interpreted as a yes. The morning of my birthday, I woke up with a flutter of excitement. 30 felt significant, a real adult milestone. I took extra care getting ready, wearing a new emerald dress I'd splurged on and spending more time than usual on my makeup. My phone pinged with a text from Bailey, "Happy birthday, beautiful soul. Can't wait to celebrate you tonight." At least someone remembered. I smiled at my reflection in the mirror, adjusting my grandmother's necklace. The only family heirloom I'd been given. Maybe this year will be different, I whispered to myself. Maybe tonight they'll finally see me. I spent the day in a good mood, accepting birthday wishes from colleagues at school. Daniel, the principal, had even arranged for cupcakes in the teacher's lounge. My students made me a card signed by the whole class, and Lily, a talented sophomore, gave me a small watercolor she'd painted. These gestures touched me deeply, making me feel valued in a way I rarely experienced at home. As the workday ended, I touched up my makeup in the faculty bathroom and headed to Rossetti's, driving with windows down and music playing. The reservation was for 7 p.m., and I arrived 15 minutes early to make sure everything was perfect. The hostess led me to a round table with 6 place settings, each with a small candle and a single rose, a special touch I'd arranged the day before. Can I get you something while you wait for your party? The hostess asked. Just water for now, thank you, I replied, checking my phone. No new messages. They'll be here soon. I sat there smoothing the napkin on my lap, excitement slowly giving way to a familiar sensation of uncertainty. But I pushed it aside. This was my 30th birthday. They wouldn't miss it. Not this time. The minutes ticked by agonizingly slow. 7 p.m. came and went. By 7:15, I'd checked my phone about 20 times, sent a group text asking if everyone was running late, and was starting to attract sympathetic glances from the waitstaff. At 7:30, I ordered a glass of Cabernet, telling myself that traffic must be bad or perhaps there was some minor emergency that had delayed everyone. Would you like to order some appetizers while you wait? The waiter asked, his voice tinged with pity that made my cheeks burn. Not yet, thank you. I'm sure they'll be here any minute, I replied, trying to sound confident. By 8 p.m., I'd finished my wine and was fighting back tears. I'd sent multiple texts and tried calling both my parents and Morgan, but all went straight to voicemail. Finally, as I was contemplating whether to order food alone or just leave, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Something came up, can't make it tonight. Happy birthday, sweetie. We'll make it up to you soon. No explanation, no apology, just a vague brush-off on my 30th birthday. I stared at the message until the words blurred, a knot forming in my throat. Bailey and my other friend had texted earlier saying they were running late but would be there by 8:30. At that moment, I couldn't bear to wait any longer, couldn't stand the pitying looks from the restaurant staff or the curious glances from nearby diners. I placed $40 on the table for the wine and the trouble, and walked out with as much dignity as I could muster. Driving home, I alternated between anger and crushing disappointment. How could they do this? What something could possibly have come up that was more important than my milestone birthday dinner that had been planned for weeks? When I arrived at my apartment building, I was surprised to find Bailey sitting on the steps, a small bakery box in her hands. There's the birthday girl, she called out, but her smile faded as she saw my face. Oh no, what happened? They didn't show up, I said, my voice breaking. None of them. Not my parents, not Morgan, not Aunt Jessica. Bailey wrapped me in a tight hug. I'm so sorry, Amber. I stopped to get you this cupcake because I was running late, and I figured I'd catch you here since you weren't answering your phone. Inside my apartment, I kicked off my heels and collapsed onto the couch while Bailey made tea. The weight of disappointment was so heavy I could barely speak. Did they say why? Bailey asked gently, handing me a steaming mug. Mom sent a text saying something came up. That's it. I scrolled through my phone, checking for any additional messages. I don't understand what could be so important. Bailey shifted uncomfortably, looking down at her tea. Amber, I'm not sure if I should show you this, but... She hesitated, then pulled out her phone and opened Instagram. Morgan posted this about an hour ago. She turned the screen toward me. There was my sister, standing in an airport terminal with our parents and Aunt Jessica, all smiling broadly. The caption read, "Surprise. Off to Paris for a month. Best early birthday present ever. Love you Mom, Dad, and Auntie J for making this dream come true. #blessed, #family love, #Paris dreams." I stared at the photo in disbelief. The timestamp showed it was posted at 7:13 p.m., right when I was sitting alone at Rossetti's, waiting for them. Morgan's birthday was in October, more than 3 months away. They didn't forget, I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. They chose not to come. Bailey put her arm around me as the tears finally came. I sobbed into her shoulder, years of feeling second best culminating in this ultimate betrayal. They hadn't even bothered to make up a convincing lie. I'm so sorry, Amber, Bailey kept saying, but there was nothing she could say to make this better. Later, after Bailey had gone home despite offering to stay, I scrolled through the comments on Morgan's post. Dozens of congratulations and excited responses, including one from my mother, "Our girl deserves the world. Can't wait to see all your Parisian adventures. Our girl. Not girls. Just the one that mattered. I turned off my phone and crawled into bed fully dressed, too emotionally drained to even change. Sleep didn't come until the early hours of the morning, and when it did, it brought no relief from the pain of realizing I'd never truly been a priority in my own family. The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes and a determination to get answers. No more vague excuses or gaslighting. This time, I wanted the truth. I called my mother, my finger hovering over her contact for several seconds before I finally pressed it. She answered on the fourth ring. Amber, honey, now's not a good time. It's never a good time for me, is it, Mom? I interrupted, my voice steadier than I expected. I want to know why you all ditched my birthday dinner to take Morgan to Paris. A pause. It wasn't like that, Amber. This opportunity came up for Morgan suddenly. What opportunity? A vacation? And it just happened to be scheduled on my 30th birthday? It's for her career, Amber. She has meetings with some big fashion brands there. You know how important this is for her future. And my birthday dinner wasn't important? You couldn't have asked to reschedule her trip by one day? My mother's voice took on a defensive edge. I don't expect you to understand. Morgan's at a critical point in her career. These connections could make or break her future. We had to prioritize. You always prioritize her, I said, the words burning in my throat. Have you ever, even once, put me first? That's not fair, Amber. You're being oversensitive as usual. We've always supported both of you equally. It's not our fault if you're jealous of your sister's success. The gaslighting was so familiar it almost made me doubt myself. Almost. Equally? You think ditching my 30th birthday to take her on a surprise trip to Paris is equal treatment? I'm not discussing this anymore if you're going to be dramatic. We'll celebrate your birthday when we get back. I have to go now. The call ended, leaving me seething with anger and hurt. The dismissive way she'd spoken to me, the complete lack of acknowledgement of my feelings, it was all too much. Before I could second-guess myself, I grabbed my car keys and headed to my parents' house. It was time for a face-to-face confrontation. 20 minutes later, I pulled into their driveway, surprised to see several other cars parked there. Great, an audience for this showdown. I briefly considered leaving but steeled myself and walked to the door. I didn't bother ringing the bell, using my key to let myself in. I followed the sound of voices to the living room, where I found not just my parents but several extended family members, Uncle Robert and Aunt Carol, my cousins, and Aunt Jessica. They were gathered around the coffee table, looking at something on my father's iPad. Oh my goodness, that hotel looks amazing, Aunt Carol was saying. And they upgraded her room for free? The perks of having a daughter with influence, my father replied proudly. The hotel wants her to post about them, so they gave her the suite with an Eiffel Tower view. I stood in the doorway, unnoticed, as the conversation continued. It became clear they were looking at photos Morgan had already sent from Paris. How long have you been planning this trip? Uncle Robert asked. About a month, my mother replied. We wanted it to be a surprise for Morgan. She's been working so hard, she deserves this break before her big meetings next week. A month. They'd been planning this for a month, meaning they knew all along they wouldn't be at my birthday dinner. The lies were worse than I thought. Amber. Aunt Jessica finally noticed me, surprise and guilt flashing across her face. We didn't hear you come in. All eyes turned to me, expressions ranging from shocked to uncomfortable to, in my father's case, annoyed at the interruption. Sorry to crash the party, I said, hating how my voice shook. I just wanted to find out why my entire family stood me up on my 30th birthday. But I guess I have my answer now. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. My mother was the first to speak. Amber, this isn't the time. When is the time, Mom? After you've celebrated Morgan's birthday 3 months early? After you've shown her photos to everyone in the family? When exactly would be a convenient time for you to acknowledge that I exist? You're overreacting, my father said dismissively. It's just a dinner. We can do it another time. It's not just a dinner, I shouted, surprising even myself with the volume. It's 30 years of being treated like I'm less important. 30 years of dropped plans and missed events and backhanded compliments about how I should be more like Morgan. The room was dead silent now. Aunt Jessica looked pained, while the others seemed embarrassed or uncomfortable. We've always been fair to both of you, my father said, his jaw tight. It's not our fault if Morgan puts herself out there more, if she takes risks and makes something of herself instead of hiding behind a teaching job and hobby paintings. The casual cruelty of his words knocked the air from my lungs. Richard. Aunt Jessica gasped. That's a terrible thing to say. But my father wasn't finished. What? We're all thinking it. Morgan's the one who makes us proud. She's building something significant. What has Amber ever done that's worth disrupting our plans for? There it was, the truth I'd always suspected but had never heard spoken so bluntly. I wasn't worth the inconvenience. I wasn't worth changing plans for. I wasn't worth being proud of. I looked around at the faces of my family members, some awkwardly avoiding eye contact, others watching the drama unfold with barely concealed interest. Only Aunt Jessica looked genuinely distressed by what was happening. Thank you for finally being honest, I said, my voice eerily calm as shock replaced hurt. At least now I know exactly where I stand. I turned and walked out, ignoring my mother's call to come back and Aunt Jessica's attempt to follow me. In my car, I sat gripping the steering wheel, waiting for the tears to come, but I felt strangely numb. As I pulled out of the driveway, my phone began buzzing with calls from Aunt Jessica. I silenced it, needing space from everyone who had witnessed my humiliation. The truth had been spoken aloud, and there was no unhearing it. Morgan's the one who makes us proud. 6 words that confirmed a lifetime of feeling less than, of never being enough. 6 words that would change everything. The week after the confrontation passed in a blur. I called in sick to work for 3 days, something I'd never done before. I couldn't bear the thought of facing students and colleagues, of having to explain why I looked like I hadn't slept or smile through questions about my birthday celebration. Instead, I retreated into my apartment, closing the blinds and shutting out the world. My phone continued to buzz occasionally, texts from Bailey checking in, several missed calls from Aunt Jessica, even a message from Daniel asking if I was okay. I responded to Bailey with brief assurances that I was fine, just fighting a bug. The others I ignored completely. At some point during those dark days, I found myself pulling out old family photo albums from the back of my closet. I hadn't looked at them in years, but now I flipped through them with almost clinical detachment, studying the images like an anthropologist examining artifacts from a foreign culture. In photo after photo, the pattern was clear. Morgan front and center, often being embraced by one or both parents. Me on the periphery, half out of frame, partially blocked by someone else, or standing slightly apart. Even in my own milestone photos, graduation, first art show, the focus somehow shifted to Morgan, with my parents looking at her instead of me, or Morgan positioned more prominently despite the event being mine. One particular photo from my 16th birthday showed me blowing out candles while my parents watched Morgan open a surprise gift they'd brought for her so she wouldn't feel left out. I remembered that day clearly, how my excitement had deflated when my own birthday became about making sure my sister wasn't jealous. The deeper I dug, the more evidence I found. In a folder of childhood artwork, I discovered a family portrait I'd drawn in elementary school. I'd depicted myself significantly smaller than everyone else, standing apart while the rest of the family held hands. Even then, I'd understood my place. On the 4th day, I forced myself to shower and change into clean clothes. I was staring blankly at my reflection when my phone rang with Morgan's ringtone. I almost didn't answer, but a perverse curiosity made me pick up. "Hey, sis." Her voice was bright and carefree. "Sorry I missed your birthday. Paris is absolutely incredible. You should see the apartment they got me, it's right in the heart of Saint Germain. She continued chattering about Paris as if nothing was wrong, as if she hadn't participated in completely abandoning me on my birthday. I stayed silent, wondering if she would even notice. Eventually, she did. "Amber? Are you there?" "I'm here," I said flatly. "Just wondering why you're calling." "What do you mean?" "I'm calling to check in. Mom mentioned you stopped by the house and seemed upset." "Seemed upset?" I repeated incredulously. "You all ditched my 30th birthday dinner for a surprise trip to Paris." "How should I have seemed?" There was a pause. "Oh, come on, Amber. It wasn't personal. This opportunity came up a month ago," I interrupted. "Mom said you've been planning this for a month." Another pause. "Okay, yes, but these meetings are really important for my career. And my birthday wasn't important at all." Message received, loud and clear. Morgan's voice hardened. "You know what, Amber? This is why they didn't tell you. Because you always make everything about you and your feelings. Not everything revolves around your schedule." I laughed bitterly. "Nothing ever revolves around my schedule, Morgan. Nothing has ever been rearranged for me the way every family event has been rearranged for you. Do you even realize that they've never missed one of your events?" "Not one. But they've missed almost everything important in my life." "Maybe if you did something impressive with your life instead of hiding in that classroom, they'd make more of an effort," she snapped. Her words echoed our father's so closely that I knew they'd disgust me, probably laughed about my dramatic reaction. The realization was like a knife twisting in my gut. "Enjoy Paris," I said, and hung up. I spent the next few days in a haze, going through the motions at work but disconnecting from everyone around me. I contemplated cutting ties with my family completely. What was the point of maintaining relationships that only brought pain? I drafted and deleted several emails formally disowning them, ranging from coldly factual to scathingly furious. On Saturday morning, a week after the confrontation, Bailey showed up at my door unannounced. "Okay, enough," she said, pushing past me into the apartment. She took one look at the unwashed dishes, the drawn blinds, and the pile of blankets on the couch where I'd been sleeping, and turned to face me with her hands on her hips. "This isn't healthy, Amber. You're not answering calls, you've barely responded to texts. I had to hear from Lily's mom that you've been off at school all week." "I'm fine," I said automatically. "You're not fine. You're spiraling." Bailey began opening blinds and collecting coffee mugs. "Look, what your family did was absolutely horrible. They're toxic, and you have every right to be hurt and angry. But this," she gestured around the apartment, "this is letting them win." "There's no winning here, Bailey. There never was. I've spent my entire life trying to earn their love and approval, and it turns out that was never even possible. Morgan's the golden child, and I'm nobody." Bailey grabbed my shoulders firmly. "Stop it. You are not nobody. You're a talented artist. You're a teacher who changes lives. Do you know Lily told her mom you're the reason she didn't drop out last year? You're my best friend, the most compassionate person I know. The fact that your family doesn't see your worth doesn't mean you don't have any." I tried to pull away, but Bailey held firm. "They won't change, Amber," she said, her voice gentler now. "They won't suddenly become the family you deserve. The only thing you can control is how much power you give them over your life." I sank onto the couch, the truth of her words hitting me hard. I don't know how to stop caring what they think. I've been trying to please them my entire life. "Then it's time to learn something new," Bailey said, sitting beside me. "It's time to live for yourself instead of for their approval. And step one is cleaning up this apartment and yourself, because you reek." Despite everything, I laughed, a small, rusty sound, but genuine. Bailey stayed the rest of the day, helping me clean, ordering food, and just being present. By the time she left, I felt more human than I had in days. That night, I slept in my bed for the first time in a week. And when morning came, I made a decision: I would go to work on Monday with my head held high. I wouldn't give my family the power to destroy the life I had built, however modest it might seem to them. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was a start. Monday morning arrived with a clarity I hadn't felt in days. I dressed carefully in one of my more professional outfits, a navy blue dress with a structured jacket, applied makeup to hide the lingering shadows under my eyes, and headed to school with a determination to focus solely on my work. My first class was Advanced Placement Art, a small group of talented juniors and seniors who were serious about their craft. As they worked on their portfolio pieces, I moved around the room offering guidance and encouragement, momentarily losing myself in the familiar rhythm of teaching. Near the end of class, I noticed Lily hanging back while the others packed up. She approached my desk hesitantly as the room emptied. "Ms. Reynolds? Are you okay? You seemed different last week." The genuine concern in her voice caught me off guard. I'd thought I'd hidden my emotional state better than that. "I'm fine, Lily. Just had some family stuff going on." She nodded, fidgeting with the strap of her portfolio case. "I get that. My family's pretty messed up too." She paused, then added, "Your art helped me, you know. When things got really bad at home last year, being able to come here and paint was the only thing that kept me going some days." Her words hit me with unexpected force. While I'd been spiraling over my family's rejection, I'd almost forgotten the impact I had in this classroom. "Thank you for telling me that, Lily. Your art helps me too. All of you do." She smiled shyly before heading to her next class, leaving me with a strange new feeling, a tiny spark of purpose reigniting. Later that day, Daniel knocked on my classroom door during my planning period. "Got a minute?" he asked, stepping inside. "Wanted to check how you're doing. Those sick days weren't like you." "I'm better now," I said, surprising myself by meaning it. "Just had some personal issues to work through." Daniel nodded, studying me with his perceptive gaze. "Well, I'm glad you're back. Actually, I came to talk to you about an opportunity." He placed a brochure on my desk. The district received a grant for an after-school arts program targeting at-risk students. We need someone to develop and lead it. Full creative control, additional stipend. I immediately thought of you. I picked up the brochure, scanning the details. It was substantial: twice-weekly sessions, supplies budget, even exhibition space at the community center. "Why me?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Because you don't just teach technique, Amber. You show students how art can help them process life. That's exactly what these kids need." He paused. "It's a lot of extra work, though. Take some time to think about it." "I don't need time," I heard myself say. "I want to do it." Daniel smiled. "Great. We'll talk details tomorrow." After he left, I stared at the brochure, feeling something shift inside me. This was an opportunity to create something meaningful, something entirely mine. For once, I wasn't making a decision based on what my family might think or whether it would finally earn their approval. That evening, I started sketching program ideas instead of checking Morgan's Instagram or waiting for calls that wouldn't come. When my phone buzzed with a text from my mother asking if I was over my tantrum yet, I simply put the phone on silent and returned to my planning. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into developing the arts program. I researched therapeutic art techniques, designed projects that would help students express difficult emotions, and transformed a forgotten storage room into a dedicated studio space. Working late became my new normal, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of purpose that had nothing to do with seeking validation from my family. When my mother called to inform me that they'd be back from Paris the following weekend and expected me at Sunday dinner to clear the air, I surprised myself by declining. "I have plans," I said simply. "What plans could be more important than family?" she demanded. "My plans," I replied, and ended the call before she could argue. Bailey noticed the change in me first. "You seem different," she observed over coffee one Saturday. "More, I don't know, present?" I'm trying something new, I explained. I'm focusing on the people who actually see me instead of chasing after the ones who don't. The arts program launched in October with 12 students referred by guidance counselors. Among them was a quiet freshman named Marcus who reminded me painfully of myself at that age, talented but invisible, creating beautiful work that no one seemed to notice. I made a point of highlighting his strengths, of making sure he knew his art mattered. As the weeks passed, my phone continued to buzz with increasingly insistent messages from my parents and occasional check-ins from Morgan, who had extended her Paris stay after receiving a job offer there. I responded selectively, maintaining enough contact to avoid an all-out confrontation but establishing clear boundaries around my time and emotional energy. Aunt Jessica was the only family member I agreed to see, meeting her for lunch one crisp fall day. Unlike the others, she offered a genuine apology. I should have told you about Paris, she admitted. I knew it was wrong to plan it for your birthday, but I didn't speak up. Why not? I asked, not accusingly but genuinely wanting to understand. She sighed. Your parents have always had a blind spot when it comes to how they treat you and Morgan differently. Pointing it out just leads to arguments, and after a while. She trailed off, looking ashamed. After a while, it was easier to go along with it. I'm sorry, Amber. Her honesty was refreshing, even if the explanation hurt. We agreed to maintain our relationship separate from the rest of the family drama. Around this time, I also started seeing Dr. Rachel, a therapist Bailey had recommended. In her calm office with its soft lighting and comfortable chairs, I began the painful process of unpacking my family dynamics. What you're describing is classic golden child and scapegoat roles, Dr. Rachel explained during one session. It's not about you or anything you've done or failed to do. It's a dysfunctional system that needed someone to be the problem so everyone else could feel better about themselves. But why me? I asked, the question that had haunted me for years. Often it's arbitrary, or based on factors present at birth, order, gender, resemblance to other family members. The important thing to recognize is that you didn't cause it, and you can't fix it. The only thing you can control is how you respond to it now. These sessions were difficult but clarifying. Slowly, I began to understand how my desperate need for validation had shaped my life choices, how I'd made myself smaller to avoid threatening the family narrative, how I'd internalized messages about my worth that had nothing to do with reality. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, Dr. Rachel reminded me when I expressed guilt about distancing myself from my parents. It's necessary for your well-being. You deserve relationships that are reciprocal and supportive, not ones that constantly drain you. By November, I had developed a new routine centered around my teaching, the arts program, my own painting, and the small circle of people who genuinely cared about me. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't organizing my schedule around the slim possibility of family approval. It wasn't perfect, I still had moments of profound sadness and lingering anger, but it was a beginning. The arts program flourished throughout the fall semester. What had started as a small group of reluctant participants grew into a vibrant community of 20 students who showed up consistently, some even coming early to work on their projects. Their progress was remarkable, not just in technical skills but in their willingness to express themselves authentically. In early December, the local newspaper ran a feature on the program, highlighting how arts education was creating positive outcomes for at-risk students. The article included a photo of me working with Marcus and quoted several students about the impact the program had on their lives. Daniel forwarded the online version to the entire school staff with a note of congratulations. I hadn't shared much about my professional life with my family since our falling out, so I was surprised when my mother called that evening. "Why didn't you tell us about this newspaper article?" she asked, an unfamiliar note of interest in her voice. "Your father and I had to hear about it from Diane Wilson at the grocery store. She was going on and on about her grandson being in your program." "I didn't think you'd be interested," I said honestly. "Of course we're interested. Our daughter in the newspaper, that's something to be proud of." The words I'd longed to hear for years now rang hollow. Why was public recognition the only thing that made my work valuable in their eyes? The program's going well, I said neutrally. The students are doing amazing work. Well, we want to hear all about it. We're coming to your school's winter showcase next week. I froze. The showcase was indeed happening, featuring work from both my regular classes and the special program, but I hadn't mentioned it to my parents. How did you know about the showcase? It was in the article, dear. Friday at 7 o'clock, right? We'll be there. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. After months of minimal contact, they were suddenly interested in my work because it had received public recognition. The thought of them showing up, of having to navigate their presence in the space that had become my sanctuary, filled me with dread. But when Friday arrived, I was professionally dressed and outwardly composed as I welcomed parents and community members to the showcase. Inside, though, I was on high alert, scanning the crowd for my parents. They arrived 15 minutes late, making an entrance as always. My mother air-kissed my cheek while my father stood back, surveying the student artwork with a critical eye. "This is quite the production," my mother said, looking around. "I had no idea your little art classes were so involved." Before I could respond, Daniel approached to introduce himself. "Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds? I'm Daniel Foster, the principal. I just wanted to tell you what an asset your daughter is to our school. This program she's developed has made a tremendous difference for our students." My father straightened, his demeanor shifting. "Well, creativity runs in the family. Morgan's doing very well in the fashion world in Paris, you know. Just signed with a major design house." And there it was, the immediate pivot to Morgan. Some things never changed. "How nice," Daniel said politely, but I could see his quick glance of concern in my direction. "If you'll excuse me, I need to speak with some of our board members. Amber, the students from your special program are asking for you near their display." I gratefully escaped to the other side of the gymnasium, where my arts program students had their work displayed. I was deep in conversation with Marcus about his powerful series on identity when I felt a hand on my shoulder. "Amber, introduce us to your students," my mother said, having followed me across the room. For the next 20 minutes, I watched in discomfort as my parents inserted themselves into conversations with my students and colleagues, somehow managing to mention Morgan's success in Paris in almost every exchange. They took credit for my artistic talent and spoke about the program as if they'd been supportive all along. When they finally left, claiming a dinner engagement, I felt physically exhausted from the effort of maintaining a professional facade. "Those were your parents?" Lily asked, appearing at my side. "Unfortunately, yes." She studied me with surprising perception. "They talk about your sister a lot." I couldn't help a small, sad laugh. "Yes, they do. My dad's like that with my brother," she said matter-of-factly. "It used to make me feel like garbage until I realized it says more about him than it does about me." Out of the mouths of babes. I squeezed her shoulder gently. "You're pretty wise, Lily." 2 weeks later, my parents hosted a welcome home dinner for Morgan, who was visiting for the holidays before her permanent move to Paris in January. Against my better judgment, I agreed to attend, telling myself it was just one evening and I was stronger now. The house was decorated for Christmas, Morgan's favorite holiday. As I entered, I could hear her holding court in the living room, regaling our extended family with stories about Parisian life. I greeted everyone quietly and found a seat on the periphery, observing the familiar family dynamics from my new perspective. Throughout dinner, the conversation revolved almost exclusively around Morgan's exciting new job and apartment. When Aunt Jessica made an effort to ask about my arts program, my father quickly redirected. "That reminds me, Morgan, tell everyone about that gallery opening you attended with the French Minister of Culture." I saw Aunt Jessica's flash of annoyance, but she didn't push the issue. Neither did I, choosing instead to focus on my meal and occasional side conversations with my young cousins. It wasn't until dessert that the tension finally erupted. My mother tapped her glass for attention. "We have some exciting news," she announced. "Your father and I have decided to help Morgan with the deposit for her Paris apartment. It's extremely expensive, as you can imagine, But for an opportunity like this, we want to make sure she has the best possible start. Morgan beamed. It's the most amazing place in Montmartre. I couldn't possibly afford it on my starter salary alone. How much are we talking about? Uncle Robert asked. Just 20,000, my father said casually. We're considering it an investment in her future. $20,000. More than half my annual teaching salary. More than I'd needed for the down payment on my own apartment, which I'd saved for years to afford because my parents had made it clear they wouldn't help. You paid for my sister's apartment? The words escaped before I could stop them, my voice quiet but intense. My father frowned. It's just a deposit, Amber. That's not what I asked. You're giving her $20,000 for an apartment in Paris after making me pay for my own college education? An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Morgan shifted uneasily in her seat. Your situation was different, my mother said dismissively. You stayed local for college. Morgan needs to be in Paris for her career. I stayed local because you told me you wouldn't pay for me to go to art school in New York, I replied, memories flooding back. You said it was too expensive and impractical. But now you're giving Morgan the equivalent of a year's tuition for an apartment deposit? My father's expression hardened. This isn't the time or place for this discussion. When is the right time? When I'm not around to hear about it? The way I wasn't around when you planned your Paris trip on my birthday? My voice remained calm, but I could feel years of suppressed hurt and anger rising to the surface. Here we go again, Morgan muttered, rolling her eyes. Always making everything about you. No, Morgan, that would be you, I replied. Everything in this family has always been about you. My entire life has been spent watching from the sidelines while Mom and Dad bent over backwards to give you everything you ever wanted. That's enough, my father snapped, his face reddening. You've always been jealous of your sister's success instead of working to create your own. I have created my own success. I built a life and career I'm proud of, but nothing I do will ever be good enough for you because it doesn't look like what you wanted for me. The table had gone deathly quiet, everyone watching the confrontation unfold with uncomfortable expressions. We've always treated you both equally, my mother insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. That's a lie, and everyone at this table knows it, I said, looking around at my relatives' averted gazes. You favored Morgan from day one. You've missed my art shows, my graduation, my 30th birthday, but you've never missed a single thing for her. You've criticized my career choices while supporting hers financially. You've dismissed my achievements while celebrating her every move. And the worst part is you won't even admit it. What do you want us to say? My father demanded. That we find it easier to connect with Morgan? Fine. Morgan was always easier to love. She was outgoing and affectionate while you were quiet and sensitive. She sought our approval while you retreated into your art. She made choices we understood while you insisted on this teaching career when you could have done something more significant with your talent. The brutal honesty stunned the room into silence. There it was, the truth laid bare at last. I wasn't imagining the differential treatment. It was real, it was intentional, and it was because of who I fundamentally was. My mother's eyes had filled with tears. Richard, that's not. Stop lying, Diana, he interrupted. We've tiptoed around this for years. Amber wants honesty? Fine. Yes, we've given Morgan more support because she's used it to build something we're proud of. Something tangible that we can understand and share with our friends. I stood up slowly, a strange calm settling over me. Thank you for finally telling me the truth. I've spent my entire life trying to earn your love, not realizing it was conditional all along. I'm done trying to be someone I'm not just to make you proud. Amber, wait, Aunt Jessica called as I headed for the door. I paused, turning back to look at my family one last time. Love me equally or not at all. Those are the only options going forward. With that, I walked out into the cold December night, leaving behind the sounds of my mother crying and Aunt Jessica arguing with my father. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty about causing a scene or disrupting the family peace. I had spoken my truth, and regardless of their response, I knew I couldn't go back to the way things had been. January arrived with the quiet reset of a new year. I hadn't spoken to my parents or Morgan since the Christmas dinner confrontation, though Aunt Jessica checked in regularly. I wasn't actively avoiding them anymore, I had simply stopped reaching out, stopped trying to bridge the gap. The ball was in their court now. Meanwhile, my life continued to evolve. The success of the arts program had created new opportunities at school. Danielle had increased the budget for the spring semester and arranged for a proper exhibition space at the community center for the students' year-end showcase. The work gave me a sense of purpose that was deeply fulfilling. I was also painting more than I had in years, not the careful, technically proficient pieces I'd created in the past, but raw, emotionally honest works that explored themes of invisibility, familial bonds, and self-discovery. I worked late into the night in my apartment's small spare room, which I'd converted into a proper studio space with the help of Bailey and a few colleagues. "These are different," Bailey observed one evening, studying a series of canvases propped against my wall. "There's something, I don't know, more authentic about them. I'm not trying to please anyone but myself with these," I explained. "It's liberating." My therapy sessions with Dr. Rachel continued to provide valuable perspective. "What you're experiencing is a form of grieving," she explained during one particularly difficult session. "You're mourning the family relationship you deserved but never had. It's painful, but it's also healthy. It means you're no longer in denial." In late February, an unexpected opportunity arose. Marcus, my student from the arts program, had told his mother about my personal work, and she'd mentioned it to her brother, Marcus Williams, who owned a small gallery downtown. He reached out via email, asking if I'd be interested in showing him my portfolio. "It's nothing major," he clarified when I met him at his gallery, a converted industrial space with beautiful natural light. "I have a small exhibition slot open in April when another artist had to cancel. Local artists only, relatively low pressure." I showed him the recent series I'd been working on, Invisible Girl, I'd titled it, along with some of my earlier, more conventional pieces. "These newer ones," he said, pointing to the raw, emotional works, "these are what interest me. They're saying something important. Would you consider a small show, maybe 10 or 12 pieces in this vein?" I felt a flutter of both excitement and terror. I'd exhibited student work dozens of times, but showing my own deeply personal pieces felt incredibly vulnerable. "Yes," I heard myself say. I'd love that opportunity. The next 6 weeks were a blur of activity. By day, I taught my classes and ran the arts program. By night, I painted with a focus and clarity I'd never before experienced. The work poured out of me, not just the pain of my family situation, but also the journey toward self-acceptance and the unexpected joy I'd found in my teaching and mentorship. Bailey was my rock throughout the process, bringing dinner when I forgot to eat and forcing me to take breaks when I'd been at the easel too long. Daniel arranged for me to have some flexibility with my schedule, allowing me to prepare for the exhibition while keeping up with my teaching responsibilities. "The kids are really excited about your show," he told me one afternoon. "They're planning to attend the opening as a group." The thought of my students seeing this vulnerable work was terrifying but also right somehow. I'd encouraged them to express their authentic emotions through art, now I was doing the same. A week before the exhibition, as I was finalizing details with Marcus, I made a decision that surprised even me. I would invite my family to the opening. "Are you sure that's what you want?" Bailey asked when I told her. "I'm not doing it for their approval," I explained. "I'm doing it because this work is about my journey, and they're part of that story. Whether they come or not is their choice." I sent formal invitations to my parents, Morgan, and Aunt Jessica, with a short, handwritten note, "This exhibition represents my truth. You're welcome to witness it if you choose." As the opening night approached, I found myself surprisingly calm. The work was hung beautifully in the gallery space, each piece a chapter in the story of my evolution. Marcus had done an incredible job with the lighting and arrangement, creating a powerful narrative flow through the space. The night of the exhibition arrived clear and cool. I dressed carefully in a simple black dress and my grandmother's necklace, wanting to feel both professional and connected to my past. Bailey came early to provide moral support, and we shared a glass of wine in the quiet gallery before the doors opened. "No matter what happens tonight," she said, raising her glass, "I want you to remember how far you've come. This is your moment, Amber. You earned it." At 6 o'clock, Marcus opened the doors. To my amazement, people began streaming in immediately, colleagues from school, students and their parents from the arts program, friends I'd made over the years. Daniel arrived with several school administrators, immediately pulling me aside to tell me that the district was expanding funding for arts education based partly on the success of my program. "We want you to lead the initiative district-wide," he said. "A coordination role with a significant bump in pay and influence over curriculum development." I was still processing this news when Marcus appeared at my elbow. "Your work is connecting with people," he said excitedly. "Two pieces already have interested buyers, and a collector from Seattle wants to speak with you about commissioning something similar for her home." The evening proceeded in a whirlwind of conversations and congratulations. My students presented me with a collaborative piece they'd created in my honor, moving me to tears. Local arts educators introduced themselves, interested in the techniques I'd developed for the student program. It was nearing 8 o'clock, and I had almost forgotten about my family invitation when I spotted Aunt Jessica entering, followed hesitantly by my parents. My heart lurched, but I continued my conversation with a local arts reporter, watching from the corner of my eye as they moved slowly through the exhibition. They paused in front of a large canvas titled Invisible, a self-portrait where I was rendered in muted tones that almost disappeared into the background, while bright, bold brushstrokes represented the family attention focused elsewhere. It was perhaps the most direct piece in the show, painfully honest about my experience. I excused myself from the reporter and made my way toward my family, unsure what to expect. Aunt Jessica saw me first, rushing over to embrace me. "This is incredible, Amber," she said, genuine pride in her voice. "The work is so powerful." My parents stood awkwardly nearby, my father looking uncomfortable in the artistic environment while my mother's eyes were red-rimmed, as if she'd been crying. "Thank you for coming," I said simply. "These paintings," my father began, then stopped, struggling to find words. "They're about us. About how we made you feel." It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. "I never realized," my mother said, her voice breaking. "I never understood how much we hurt you." "I tried to tell you," I replied softly. "Many times, in many ways." My father, never comfortable with emotional discussions, looked around at the crowded gallery. "A lot of people came to see your work." "That's impressive." Coming from him, it was as close to an acknowledgement of my success as I'd ever received. "Mr. Reynolds?" Marcus approached, extending his hand to my father. "I'm Marcus Williams, the gallery owner. I wanted to let you know your daughter's work has generated significant interest tonight. We're already planning a larger exhibition for next year." My father shook his hand, looking slightly dazed. "I didn't realize that my art had value?" I finished for him. "That's been the problem all along." Before the conversation could continue, the gallery door opened and Morgan walked in. I hadn't expected her to come, assuming she was back in Paris. She scanned the room nervously before spotting us and making her way over. "Sorry I'm late," she said, avoiding my eyes. "My flight was delayed." "You flew in from Paris for this?" I couldn't hide my surprise. She shrugged uncomfortably. "Aunt Jessica said it was important." An awkward silence fell over our small group, years of unspoken tensions hovering between us. It was Morgan who finally broke it. "Your work is really good," she said, gesturing to the paintings around us. "I never knew you could paint like this." "You never asked," I replied, but without the bitterness that would have colored such a statement months ago. Before she could respond, Bailey appeared with a glass of champagne for me. "Sorry to interrupt, But you should know your piece emergent just sold to that school administrator, Daniel. He wants to hang it in the main office as inspiration. As Bailey led me away to meet the buyer, I glanced back at my family, still standing somewhat awkwardly amid the bustling gallery crowd. For the first time in my life, they were in my world instead of me trying to fit into theirs. Whether this moment would lead to genuine change in our relationship remained to be seen, but something significant had shifted. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of conversations and connections. 3 paintings sold in total, and Marcus assured me this was just the beginning. As the crowd thinned toward the end of the night, I found myself standing alone with my parents in a quiet corner of the gallery. "We should have been there for you more," my mother said suddenly. "I can see that now." My father nodded, his usual confidence subdued. "I don't understand your art, but clearly others do. Clearly it matters." It wasn't the wholesale apology or recognition I might once have craved, but it was perhaps the most honest acknowledgement they'd ever offered. And surprisingly, I found I didn't need more than that from them anymore. Their approval or understanding was no longer the currency by which I measured my worth. "Thank you for coming tonight," I said simply. "It means something that you did." As they prepared to leave, my father awkwardly added, "Perhaps you could come for dinner next Sunday. If you're not too busy." I considered the invitation, weighing it against the boundaries I'd established. "I'll think about it," I replied honestly. After they left, Morgan lingered, looking at one of my paintings titled Sisters, a complex piece depicting 2 figures, one brightly colored and prominently positioned, the other rendered in subdued tones but with intricate detail that revealed itself only upon close inspection. "Is this how you've always seen us?" she asked quietly. "It's how I felt growing up," I answered. "It doesn't have to be how we are going forward." She nodded thoughtfully. "I never meant to take all the air in the room." "I know," I said, and I meant it. The family dynamics weren't her fault, even if she'd benefited from them. Safe travels back to Paris. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, nor was it reconciliation, but it was an acknowledgement that we were both part of a system that had shaped us in different ways. That was enough for now. As the gallery emptied, Bailey, Marcus, and I gathered for a final toast to the evening's success. "To new beginnings," Bailey proposed. "And to authenticity," Marcus added. "To becoming visible," I finished, raising my glass. 1 year passed since that pivotal gallery opening, a year of tremendous change and growth. My relationship with my family had evolved into something I would describe as cautiously cordial. We weren't close in the way I had once desperately wanted, but we had established a more honest dynamic based on mutual respect rather than my constant striving for approval. Sunday dinners became occasional rather than obligatory events. When I did attend, I was no longer the silent, accommodating daughter hoping for scraps of recognition. I spoke my mind, shared my accomplishments when they were relevant, and most importantly, no longer measured my worth by my parents' reaction. My mother made more consistent efforts to connect with me, even attending a student exhibition I organized at the community center. She didn't fully understand my artistic choices or educational philosophy, but she was trying, in her own limited way, to see me. My father remained more distant, our relationship civil but not close. His entrenched patterns of thinking proved the most resistant to change, but he had stopped overtly comparing me to Morgan or dismissing my career, which represented significant progress. As for Morgan, our relationship underwent the most surprising transformation. After returning to Paris, she began sending me thoughtful emails about her experiences there, not the carefully curated highlights she shared on social media, but honest reflections on the challenges of building a life in a foreign country. "Sometimes I think you're the stronger one," she wrote in one message. "You built your life on your terms, while I've always needed so much external validation. I'm trying to learn from your example. We weren't best friends, and perhaps never would be, but we were building something new, a relationship between adults rather than competing siblings." When she visited at Christmas, we even managed a sister's lunch without our parents, sharing wine and conversation without the tension that had always characterized our interactions. Professionally, my life had expanded in ways I could never have predicted. The district-wide arts initiative that Daniel had mentioned was now my primary responsibility, allowing me to shape arts education across multiple schools while still maintaining some classroom teaching. The curriculum I developed for the after-school program was being implemented in districts across the state, and I'd been invited to present at several educational conferences. My artistic career had also flourished. Marcus had made good on his promise of a larger exhibition, which had attracted attention from galleries in Seattle and Portland. I wasn't famous by any means, but I was developing a respected presence in the regional art scene, with a distinctive style that critics described as emotionally resonant and unflinchingly honest. The most profound changes, however, were internal. Through continued work with Dr. Rachel and the natural healing that came with time and distance, I had largely made peace with my family history. I understood now that the dysfunctional dynamics weren't about my worth but about my parents' limitations, their inability to value what they didn't understand, their narrow definition of success, their discomfort with emotional authenticity. This understanding didn't excuse their behavior, but it allowed me to stop internalizing it as a reflection of my value. The voice in my head that had always questioned if I was enough had gradually quieted, replaced by a stronger sense of self-confidence and purpose. On a warm spring evening, almost exactly a year after my first exhibition, I found myself back at the community center, supervising as my students installed their year-end showcase. The space buzzed with excitement as teenagers carefully hung their work, adjusted lighting, and created labels. Marcus, who had become a friend and mentor, walked through with me, offering guidance to the students about professional presentation. Lily, now a competent senior headed to art school in the fall, was helping younger students position their pieces. "You've built something special here," Marcus observed. "These kids have found their voices through art, just like you did." "It's come full circle," I agreed, watching as Marcus's student carefully hung a bold abstract piece that explored his complicated feelings about his parents' divorce. My own journey helped me understand how to guide theirs. As the installation continued, Daniel arrived with exciting news. The district had secured a major grant to establish an arts academy within our high school, with dedicated facilities and specialized curriculum. "We want you to develop and direct it," he told me. "Full creative control, significant pay increase, opportunity to hire your own team." "That's incredible," I said, genuinely moved by his faith in me. "Thank you for seeing what was possible before I did." "You just needed someone to notice your potential," he replied simply. "Sometimes that's all any of us need." Later that evening, as I prepared to leave, Lily approached with a small wrapped package. "This is for you," she said shyly. "A thank you gift." Inside was a delicate ceramic pendant, a miniature palette with tiny brushes, glazed in vibrant colors. "I made it in ceramics class," she explained. "Because you helped me find my colors when everything felt gray." I hugged her, remembering the withdrawn freshman she'd been when we first met. "You did the hard work," I told her. "I just created the space for you to discover yourself." "That's what good teachers do," she replied with wisdom beyond her years. "They help you become visible to yourself first, so you can then be seen by others." Her words resonated deeply. In trying to help these students overcome their own feelings of invisibility, I had completed my own healing journey. When I returned to my apartment that night, I found myself drawn to my easel, where a new canvas awaited. I had recently begun a series called Visible, companion pieces to the invisible works that had formed the core of my first exhibition. Where the earlier paintings had explored erasure and absence, these new works celebrated presence and self-definition. As I painted late into the night, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The pain of my 30th birthday had transformed into something powerful and generative. My family's failure to see me had ultimately led me to truly see myself, and in doing so, to help others feel seen as well. The next morning, I received an unexpected email from Aunt Jessica with a photograph attached. It showed a painting hanging in my parents' living room, one of my paintings from the first exhibition, a piece called Emergence that depicted a figure stepping from shadow into light. I hadn't known they had purchased it through Marcus. "Your mother looks at this every day," Jessica wrote. "She's trying to understand, in her way. We all are." I sat with this information, feeling neither vindicated nor vengeful, simply at peace. My art, my truth, had found its place in their home, just as I had finally found my place in the world. Not as the daughter they had wanted me to be, but as the woman I had become despite, and perhaps because of, their limitations. That evening, as I prepared for a small dinner gathering with Bailey, Marcus, and a few close friends, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. At 31, I looked different somehow, more present in my own skin, more confident in my gaze. The invisible girl had emerged, visible at last to herself and to the world. The journey hadn't been easy, and there would surely be challenges ahead. Family wounds don't heal overnight, and old patterns have a way of reasserting themselves in moments of stress. But I had found my voice, my community, and my purpose. I had learned that while we can't always change how others see us, we can change how we see ourselves. And perhaps most importantly, I had discovered that the most meaningful validation comes not from those who share our blood but from those who share our values, the family we choose, the communities we build, the lives we touch through our authentic presence in the world. As I looked around my apartment at the paintings leaning against the walls, the student thank you notes pinned to my bulletin board, the upcoming exhibition announcements on my desk, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. My 30th birthday had seemed like an ending, the final confirmation of my invisibility in my family's eyes. Instead, it had become a beginning, the first day of truly being seen, starting with seeing myself. For those of you watching who have felt invisible in your own families, I want you to know that your story doesn't end there. Your worth isn't determined by those who fail to see you. Sometimes the most profound growth comes from the deepest wounds, and the most beautiful art emerges from the darkest places. Stand in your own light, speak your own truth, and build your family of choice from those who celebrate your authentic self. Have you ever had to create boundaries with family to protect yourself? Share your story in the comments below, hit like if this resonated with you, and don't forget to subscribe for more authentic conversations about family dynamics and personal growth. Remember, becoming visible to yourself is the first step toward being truly seen by others. Thank you for being part of this journey with me.